The kids on Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
Halloweenies, a Freddy Krueger podcast.
Was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
From the Consequence Podcast Network, the minds behind The Losers Club, comes a new podcast in fantasy terror.
Nancy, there's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Halloweenies, a Freddy Krueger podcast.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's an audio interview series presented by WFPK, independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks to everyone who's hit that subscribe button, checks out the multiple interviews every single week. If you haven't already, of course, you can do that now, wherever you get your favorite podcasts from, as well as leaving the series a rating, giving it a review as well, if you feel so inspired. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest is William DuVall. You may know William in many ways. Of course, for the past 12 years, I guess, he's been one of the singers of Alice in Chains, of course, along with Jerry Cantrell. Or maybe you know him from the band before that, Comes With the Fall. Or maybe you know him all the way back from his 80s hardcore days with Neon Christ. But today you're going to know him as a solo artist for the first time in an over 35-year career. William DuVall has completed an album called One Alone, and the title says it all. It's him, his voice, and a guitar. It is as a solo record as you can get, as we'll talk about. And of course, he'll answer the question, why now? And exactly what is this record? Where did the songs come from? And not just musically, but what makes this record different from all of the other projects he's been a part of. We'll also talk about the first single, Till the Light Guides Me Home, and the dual nature of its lyrics, as well as a track called Chains Around My Heart. And speaking of Chains, we will turn the clocks back to 2009 to talk about the first record that he did with Alice in Chains, Black Gives Way to Blue, which did come out a decade ago this year. It was a really big moment in his career, and he's going to tell us about what that experience was like going into the studio and knowing that there were so many expectations from fans and critics and just anyone who ever fell in love with an Alice in Chains song. And he'll comment on the good times, the crazy times, and the facial hair. So much facial hair. It was also a record that was completed on the day that his very first child was born. And talk about just blowing up your life. We're also going to hear about what that experience was like. But for the most part, it's all about this debut solo album, One Alone. It's Kyle Meredith with William DuVall.
Hi, Kyle. Hi, it's William DuVall.
So, the last couple months, you've got the debut solo record coming out with One Alone. This comes right after, I guess, finishing the campaign for Rain or Fog. The tour is over. And that's a hard stop, right? I mean, what's it like to know when an entire chapter is actually put to bed?
It's very rewarding, and at the same time, there's a little bit of sadness that goes with it because you've been traveling around with this huge group of people like a giant family in a way. And now all of a sudden you wake up and, there's no gig, there's no sound check, there's no seeing my lighting guy and my sound guy and my stage manager and, all of these people that you wake up every day and this is just your routine for years. And suddenly it's not. So there's all those feelings that go along with that. But mostly it's a feeling of great accomplishment and reward. So we're very, very happy with how it all went. And we're just really grateful for everybody that came out. And
it's not like you get to, sit and rest too long because you turn around and as soon as that ends, you say, all right, it's time to release my own record now. And here's One Alone. And let's just say how crazy it is that for as long as you've been going as a musician in the business, that this is your first solo record. I mean, but you've always been a band guy, right?
That's right. Yeah, always been a band guy since I was a teenager, and it took quite a bit of soul searching to get myself to a place where I could put out, just come to grips with putting out music under my own name. But I felt like if there was ever going to be a time to do it and an album with which to do it, this would be it. So I just, went full bore with it, like, okay, this guitar, there's one guitar, one voice all the way through, and we're just going to call it what it is. We're going to call it One Alone, and I've got to just make this my first album under my own name. That this is what it is. Anything else wouldn't have felt honest. So this was a great kind of a breakthrough in a way.
As you have done so many genres over the years, it's not like it's radically different per se, but it is something else. One voice, one guitar. How different was that for you to go into a studio like that? Because as far as when most people say solo record, they're still talking about a team of people, a producer, an engineer, whatever, who's working with them. But like this sounds exactly like a solo record.
Right. Can't get much more solo than this. Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. And yes, most of the breakthrough that I was referring to before mostly had to do with how I perceived things. You're exactly right. There's been a lot of mixing and commingling of genres throughout my whole career as a musician, and that will continue. That's kind of a mainstay. But with regard to this record specifically, I didn't go in thinking that I was going to record a solo album. I didn't go in thinking that I was recording anything that would necessarily ever be released to the public. Initially, I went in to do what I thought was going to be a demo for one song, Till the Light Guides Me Home. And once I was there in the studio and that song went down so quickly, it was just like a few minutes and we're done. And I was like, well, I'm here. I might as well lay down a few other things. And so there were these songs that I had done with Comes With the Fall on our records as a full band, but they were songs that I always thought could potentially present well in a solo acoustic setting. And so I decided, while I'm here, let me throw down a few of those. So by the time, in an afternoon, basically, I had walked out with 8 songs. And then as I was listening to them, just kind of, driving around or whatever, or listening to them casually, I thought, this kind of sits well together. And if I ever wanted to do an acoustic album, this could be kind of the genesis of it. And eventually I just, again, through all the soul searching of about how I might release music in the future, it just sort of all came together like, yeah, okay, this is a solo album. It's as solo as you can get, and it's time to just put it out under your own name and just make this what it's going to be. And 8 songs is not enough, so go back in and record a few more. So I did that in an evening, and now we have the One Alone album. And it took a while for everything to line up to get to this point. But now that we're here, I'm really glad we're here.
Well, it's got such powerful moments all throughout it, when you get into the individual little tiny moments within the songs. You mentioned that first single, Till the Light Guides Me Home, which on one surface side, it sounds like the thing, like, I've been gone a while, I'm coming back. Maybe there was a relationship involved in something, but I also wanted to look at it from a side and stop me if I'm stretching here. But, with that word, the light, I'd read that you had a degree in philosophy and religion. And I thought, I wonder if that still plays a big part of his songwriting, if that sort of finds its way in little moments like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, even unconsciously, that stuff is just always going to be there, latent throughout everything. And it's always fascinated me, our existence, the fact that we're here and what we might be doing here. Like if we even want to bother to ascribe some sort of reason for that,
right,
or any sort of design on it. And that stuff is fascinating, and our ways of organizing ourselves and our ways of ritualizing certain things. All of that stuff has always held a lot of interest for me, and so it's always going to come out whether it's conscious or not. And I would always be quick and careful to say that if anything, it's more of an overall interest in or fascination with spirituality or the potential existence of a higher consciousness or a more elevated state of being that we might be able to attain. It's not really about religion, so to speak. So that strain is always going to be in whatever work I do. It always has been. So I suspect it always will be. And so no, it's not a stretch. It's just kind of a commingling of the everyday
Right.
hassle that we go through with awareness or a hope for something that transcends that.
Well, that's the kind of the fun of having dual nature of songs when they lend themselves to that. I mean, even that opening line there with "Dark Days Tearing Me Down." Again, that could be so personal, or you could be talking about what a lot of artists are struggling, or not struggling, but working with, trying to convey and reflect what they're seeing in the news and everything else. How a song starts like that. I mean,
Absolutely.
because the whole album, that's the kickoff line for everything right there. So it's a potential setup, I guess.
Right. No, that's exactly right. It works on a lot of levels, and I'm happy with however people want to interpret and internalize that. That is what the music is for. That is I would say its primary function is to be of service to the listener, to incorporate into their own lives however they want, however they need. My greatest aspiration for this album is that it might become a friend to somebody.
Do you find that you stay away from certain, I don't know, trigger word is the right word, but you have a title like Chains Around My Heart, and I don't think my thought eventually, my brain went there first, like, oh, chains, Alice in Chains. There's something to do with it, but there are certain words for certain artists that are like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
That's so funny. I never thought of that. I never did. Chains Around My Heart that's actually an old tune of mine that I had a long time ago, and it was another one of those songs that I thought, hey, this might present well just doing it this way. One guitar, one voice. Never done that. Never thought about doing it on an album that way. But I think this could be one that could work with that presentation as well. And it's just always a song that I felt should have, or it's a song I always felt could have various lives and never found its proper way into the world. So I just wanted to record it again. In this way for this album.
Well, that's really impressive then, but, knowing now that, some of these songs that they're not all written at the same time, because there is a, possibly unintentional, but there is a thematic cohesiveness that goes along to this record. Were any of the songs chosen because of that?
Maybe, again, unconsciously. I think I was mostly concerned with what songs will best be served with this particular presentation, because it's kind of a daring thing to come out like this. I mean, to do it for an entire album, that's kind of a big ask of people. And I realized that. Yeah, I realized that. And to go out and carry a show, like I'm obviously gonna go and tour this record, and to go out and carry an entire show that way, it's no small thing. And so I was mostly concerned with songs that I felt could hold up under that kind of songs that could hold up while being that reductive in the way they're presented. So that was the primary focus, is can this work? And then it was, okay, how are these songs sitting together, and how might I sequence them as a running order for an album, and that sort of thing. And so that was the main thing. And then, as you say, after that, just as a listening experience, I suppose there are certain themes that come up throughout. But yeah, that wasn't the primary thing going into it. Was like, okay, how can I, kind of create a thematic album here? It's mostly just what's going to work, and then I suppose as a function of the particular, like songs that hold up under such a raw and naked kind of a presentation, they tend to be songs that are about intense emotional things, and the most common being love lost, love regained, struggles of that nature. So yeah, I mean, I can see how you put an album like this together, and it's going to kind of those themes are going to come up quite often. But it's cool, and I dig it. And like I said, I think the main thing is going to be when people take this album into their own lives. That's going to be when the real work is done.
Does the title? It seems like it's an answer to the Neon Christ All Alone Together.
Oh wow, yeah, wow. I hadn't thought of that either, but that's interesting too. That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, wow. The struggles of documentary filmmaking. Film at 11. It's like it's like I was just speaking to a Spanish reporter about that, about those films and how while on one hand the costs of filmmaking have gone way down due to the internet and the digital media resources at our disposal now. In fact, you don't have to worry about buying and maintaining film stock and that kind of thing. The process has been somewhat democratized, but believe me, brother, the struggle continues as far as you know what I mean? And he was just saying how this reporter was interviewing. He had interviewed the Danny Clinch, the photographer who just made a film, I guess, about Shannon Hoon, the blind melon singer. And he was saying how that film took over 10 years to get made. And I was like, yeah, see, that I can identify, because that's the thing. It's like you just see this film and you go, oh, that's cool, that's whatever, but you don't realize, oh, it took 20 years, or it took 15 years, it took 10 years. What the filmmakers have to go through to bring these things to market is quite a saga in and of itself. And I definitely understand. But One Alone was really just, it was like, that's what this is. Mm-hmm. Once I got that title in my mind, it was like, it just can't be anything else. Even on the initial group of 8 songs, like when I put it onto my iPod, I called it One Alone. Even back then, before I even ever thought this was going to be an album. Wow. That's how embedded it is into the whole thing.
I wanted to quickly bring up, because it's also the 10th anniversary of Black Gives Way to Blues this year.
That old chestnut.
That old chestnut. Most of the time for a lot of artists, it's usually the 20th or 25th before they really start looking back. But it seems like, for a career as you've had, that does become a big landmark in it, that record right there. And for a lot of fans, too. And I just kind of wanted to get a couple thoughts, as you look back. I mean, on one hand, 10 years wasn't all that long ago, but kind of like, what do you remember about those sessions?
Other ways, it seems like, it's all a blur, man. So, no, I mean, it's been 10 years, and in some ways it feels like a century, because of all of the things that we've been through. Just, oh my God. I mean, all of the shows, all of the traveling, obviously the 2 albums that have followed it, and all of the things that have gone on in our own lives, outside of the music. I mean, it's been a very, very, very busy 10 years. But what do I remember? It's interesting because our office just sent this little piece of film on one of the songs, and one of our guys. We used to do those studio documentary pieces while we were making that record, and we used to put them out on the internet and everything and kind of give people a glimpse inside the process or whatever. And so the guy that shot all of those, who's our longtime friend and assistant, Todd, he shot this thing for one of the tunes on the album that never was really released as a single. And the office just sent it yesterday, and we hadn't seen it in 10 years or whatever. And it was kind of a collection of some of these little scenes, these little tidbits like we used to put in those little studio document sessions. So it was kind of like all of that, but set to one song, snippets of things that weren't in any of the other things that we had already put out. So it was wild, man. It was wild because it really transformed, or it really brought me back. It was kind of like looking at a bunch of other dudes in a way. You know what I mean? It was, Cantrell and I had the beards and everything. We were, we had resolved very early on in that process of making that record that we were not going to shave until it was done. And so by the end, we just had these gigantic Grizzly Adams, Rip Van Winkle kind of situations happening. We were ZZ Top or whatever. So it's funny, man, because you see all of that in this little clip. I think we're going to put it out. It's for Private Hell. So, yeah, it's going to maybe bring other people back to that time. Yeah. But it definitely brought me back. It was like, wow, man, like, this is crazy. Like, there's so much about it that I would not remember were it not for the fact that we were documenting so much of it. And that's just because of the speed and intensity with which everything was happening. A lot of it you just block out because you have to get through the day, because you have to keep surviving and you have to keep working. And you have to remember, too, there was so much noise around what we were doing at that time. And there was so much debate and all this, just all this external kind of stuff happening outside of the bubble that we created for ourselves. So a lot of our time and a lot of our energy was spent on blocking that stuff out. So when I think about that time, what I remember mostly is that feeling of how intense it was. It was intense emotionally, just purely on an internal level, what was going on amongst the four of us, but it was doubly intense because of all of the external noise and the external pressure, which we were trying to block out the entire time. So that's kind of what characterizes that whole period for me. So a lot of specifics. I don't remember a lot of specifics. I don't, when I look at a piece of film or video or whatever of us goofing around in the studio or whatever it is, I don't remember that moment. I just remember the overall feeling that was happening. But it was cool. I mean, it worked out really well, and there was a lot of laughter and everything. I mean, again, a lot of the energy that we put towards blocking out the external noise and the external debate and all of that was so that we could continue to laugh in the studio, so that we could continue to be ourselves. We were fighting for the right to exist. And so we were, very much trying to not just write and record these songs, but also just laugh and be stupid and do our thing. So it was a trip, man. It was a real trip.
It's interesting because I would have never thought about it like that. It's a group of friends who really just at the end of the day just want to get together and write a song, but the outside pressure of all of these other people trying to impose all this weight and history and everything else. You know, that's really interesting.
Yeah. It was.
Yeah. So you completed it on the day your son was born, was that right?
Yeah, that's right. He was it was the last day of tracking, and very last day of tracking, and I had to rush to the hospital, I remember shaving cutting that gigantic beard off, because it was like, I don't want my boy, the first thing he sees is this face full of hair, that's might even on some unconscious level scare or otherwise scar him. Because I know a lot of little kids, I know I was really scared of things like mustaches and things. It's just stuff that you don't even understand why it would be scary, but it just is. And I remember that from being a little kid, and I know how some kids react to that stuff. And so I remember being in the studio, and the whole thing was pre-scheduled. It was one of those things, And so it wasn't like, you get the call and you got to rush there. It was a rush because it was an adrenaline rush, and it was a really huge emotional rush, but it was not that typical story of, it's happening! Oh, God, get it over. So with me, it was like it was scheduled. We knew what was happening. Everything was going on schedule, and I was at the studio for what was the last day of tracking, and then it was like, okay, and at such time, I got to be heading over. So it was like, let me go and hack this freaking forest off my face. Okay. And so I remember going into the restroom at Henson, at the A&M studio, now it's Henson, and Todd with a camera, because it was, we were documenting everything. Might as well document this. This is, kind of a big deal. We've been growing these beards forever, and now we're shaving it off to symbolize the completion of this momentous thing. So I shaved it off. We got all the different stages of it. Some of the pictures have turned up on the internet because it's funny, because we filmed different stages of it. And then I went to the hospital. Yeah, it was something. It was something else.
When you talk about, it's to have two moments that both of them seem quite monumental. The birth of a child is always going to be a big thing. And then for the also to be, in your professional life, this new big career thing, like all in one day, that seems like it's so much to handle.
Man, it was huge. And funny aside, it was also Cantrell's birthday. So my son and Cantrell share a birthday. And then there was some awards thing as well, I remember, because it was like right in that time, if not the same day, then within a day or two, it was like there was this thing we had to go to. I don't remember even what it was, man, like one of those hard rock awards or something like that. And we had to go to that too. So it was just, I mean, it was bananas. The whole time period, and particularly those few days, were just beyond the beyond. And yeah, it was like there was a lot to contend with, you know, because it was this pressure cooker thing of this band trying to resurrect itself. And then on top of that, I'm becoming a parent for the first time, and there's this whole other level of responsibility that is the most daunting and serious thing that you'll ever do in your life, on top of all of this other stuff that was happening professionally, you know. So there was a new, it was a crazy wave to ride. And I suppose looking back, some ways, a lot of the time it felt purely overwhelming. But I think that in being so overwhelming, it kind of did resemble the feeling of riding a huge wave when you fall off and you get crushed under the water, and you know what I mean? There's this thing of like, well, look, I just got to I'm going to either drown or I'm going to survive, and this water is going to take me where it's going to take me right now. You know what I mean? So there's an aspect of surrender to it, while at the same time there's this enormous exercising of your own agency. You know, it's a weird mix. And it's like, you know, because I couldn't control how the public was going to react to Black Gives Way to Blue or to the new incarnation of Alice in Chains, you know what I mean, coming out with new music and all that stuff. So, and I had so many more things to focus on aside from all of that. So looking back now, as overwhelming as it felt for most of the time, I'm grateful that I had such a hugely grounding and enormous task to deal with on top of all the professional stuff. Because because it really grounded me in a way that, I mean, it's cliche to say, oh, it grounded me. But I mean, really though, it was like there was so much that I could not worry about with regard to the public face of all of this that I might have worried about to a crushing kind of debilitating extent had I not had this other thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like it had to happen that way, you know? Because I don't know how I would have made it otherwise, you know?
It sounds like a powerful moment. That was a powerful record, and I'll give you the compliment again on One Alone. It's a really great document that you've put out there. Congratulations on it.
Thank you so much, man. Really, thank you.
It's been a lot of fun to listen to, and William, thanks so much for giving me the call today too. This has been a lot of really cool to kind of dive into this record and the Chains record and stuff like that. You know, congrats on this, and I hope to see one of these solo shows out there.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I appreciate it so much, and the thought-provoking questions and the all the connections that you've made with all of these things. It's the connecting the dots is really great. It's a much more pleasant and rewarding experience to be interviewed by somebody that actually does their work beforehand. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward to bringing this record out on the road, man.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll see you out there. And again, thanks again for the call today.
Thank you, man. Okay.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Big thanks to William DuVall right there. His debut solo record is called One Alone. Do check out the video for the lead single, Till the Light Guides Me Home, as well. And, of course, the 10th anniversary, as we mentioned there, of the Alice in Chains record, Black Gives Way to Blue. And to thank you for checking out the series as well. Again, if you're already a subscriber and you want to give us a rating or leave a review, that's always a huge help. If you're not, now's the time to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening from. I assure you there is a place to keep up with us. We release brand new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so stay up to date with us. And after that, you can head to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour of new song premieres, anniversary spins, music news, interviews, and whatever else we can jam into that 60 minutes. That's WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound, they've got your music and film news. You can also find me at Twitter at Kyle Meredith and Facebook /Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.